Our guest on This is America and the World is Gonzalo Koncke. Mr. Koncke is Chief of Staff of the Secretary General to the Organization of American States. Prior to his post at OAS, Mr. Koncke served as Uruguay's permanent representative to the United Nations and as Secretary General in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Uruguay. Mr. Koncke, good to have you here, Secretary General's Chief of Staff of the Organization of American States. That's a mouthful. What is OAS, the Organization of American States?
Good to be here with you, Dennis. The Organization of American States, as you certainly know, is the main political forum in the Western Hemisphere. The Organization of American States was created in 1948. Its president was the Pan American Union. And it congregates 35 countries in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba is not participating in our meetings right now, but it is part of the organization. And it is a forum in which we have four main pillars, which are democracy, which are human rights, which is development, integral development, and which is security, multidimensional security.
Go ahead.
Those are the main four pillars that the organization stands for. Focusing on each and every one of the four is that the organization and the member states conduct their work.
Two things come into my mind right away when you said Cuba is not participating. Help us understand that.
Cuba was a founding member of the Organization of American States, and then it was expelled from the organization in the 60s. But in Insulza administration, the previous Secretary General, the resolution that decided that Cuba could not be part of the organization was corrected, was eliminated, to say it somehow, and Cuba is now entitled to be participating in the works of the organization if they want to do it. Let's see if they will want to do it in the future. For the time
so
being,
it's their choice now.
I mean, you need at least two things there. You need them to want to come back to the organization, which has not been their purpose in the last years. And at the same time, you need, in that case, to do some work within the organization for Cuba to come back. And this work is related certainly to these four pillars I mentioned.
Does it, I mean, we just started to wander down this path, and I don't want to take too much time here, but under President Obama here in the United States, grand opening for Cuba to join everyone else in the hemisphere. We don't know, and I guess it's being debated within the Trump administration how they will see it. Will that play a role one way or the other?
Not necessarily. The answer is yes, but not necessarily only one country or the organization will define the policy of the rest of the countries, of the rest of the member states. But yes, of course, the US is a very important member state of the Organization of American States, along with the other 34 member states. That's the key of multilateralism. You have one country, one vote, and you have the 34 countries participating in the works of the organization.
So we got all of the countries, and we would see Organization of American States, and we would think of the Latin American, South American country, but the islands, all of the Caribbean islands are involved as well, huh?
Absolutely. You have the CARICOM caucus, which is composed of 14 member states, 14 countries. And they play an important role in the organization. They work hard in all the pillars and all the contents that the Organization of American States is dealing with.
I guess when you go back to the 1940s and 48 and when it was all coming together, that the original goal had to do with stopping a spread of communism within this part of the world. Is that fair to say?
The geopolitical reality of the region has changed, of course, since 1940 and 1948 to today. It has changed a lot, of course. I would say the main change, but this is not necessarily an objective answer, but I would say the main change in this juridical structure of the organization in the last years has been the signature of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. This Inter-American Democratic Charter that was signed in Lima, Peru in 2001 is what has been called the Constitution of the Americas. Why? Because by the effect of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, democracy has become mandatory in the region. We already had democracy in the charter of the OAS, in the OAS's charter. But by this charter, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, we have deepened and created a legal framework that says in the first article, it says, democracy is a right of the people of the Americas.
Wow, so that's huge now. That's at the top of the pile, democracy. So I want to take a little break and come back on the other side, but that would lead us into the controversy in Venezuela right now, and hopefully you can educate us a little bit on that, because that is very much in focus right now and in the news. So we're going to take a little break. Gonzalo Koncke is the Chief of Staff to the Secretary General of the Organization of American States. We're very pleased to have you here to educate us about what's going on in OAS. We'll take a little break. Back on the other side, This is America and the World. This is America and the World is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Petroleum Group, expertise with integrity in the fields of oil and gas, exploration and production, energy, and infrastructure. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing, and distribution services. Gonzalo, can I call you that, Mr. Koncke?
Of course.
Give me the backstory that we can understand on Venezuela, because it just appears when we see a news article or something on television or radio that the country is just in free fall. Protests, violence, deaths, political prisoners, that just seems so out of character for where we are today, you know, and especially when you say democracy is number one. Talk a little bit about it, will you?
Of course, yes. It is a major crisis that we are having in Venezuela. Let me give you the context of it, because it has many variables there. Firstly, you don't have elections in Venezuela. The recall referendum that under Article 72 of the Venezuelan Constitution was supposed to take place last year has not taken place. The government has not allowed people to vote in this recall referendum last year. It was cancelled. The regional elections that were supposed to have taken place last year too were cancelled, postponed. They did not take place. So people are not voting. That is the first requirement of democracy.
Absolutely.
Second, you have political prisoners. One of them is one of the main leaders of the opposition. But today, last data we have, you have more than 170 political prisoners. Political prisoners are unacceptable everywhere, and are even more unacceptable in this hemisphere where we have an Inter-American Democratic Charter, as we were discussing. Third, you have a humanitarian crisis, a serious one, a grave one. People lack medicines, people lack food, and the government is not taking steps to find solutions for this. Four, and I'm not being exhaustive here, I'm just stating some of the major problems. Four, not independency of powers. In December 2015, legislative elections took place. The National Assembly, La Asamblea Nacional, was elected. There, the opposition obtained 2/3 of the seats in the National Assembly, and the National Assembly was declared in contempt. What does that mean? It was declared in contempt by the Supreme Court that has not allowed the National Assembly to work. they don't accept their laws. They block every law that is passed by the National Assembly.
Wow.
And finally, this year, the Supreme Court decided that the functions of the National Assembly were totally were going to be totally limited. I mean, and that was a coup d'etat. When you annihilate one of the powers of the state and you control absolutely the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is, of course, controlled by the executive power, by the presidency. That is a coup d'etat. You have the sovereignty of the people, which is in the National Assembly, and that is not working. The National Assembly is not allowed to do its work. It is not allowed to do its work. And then, what was the last development? And it is not even the last. We had repression. People started protests in this month of April, mainly, and we had severe repression in Venezuela, not only in Caracas, but across the country. In more than 10 cities across the country, we had strong repression. 29 persons were dead in Venezuela. That is something that we must have always in mind. People have been dying because of repression in the country. And repression has been with tear gas, repression has been with bullets. I mean, with bullets. Some people were dead because of fire weapons used by the security forces of the government of Venezuela. And the last development, it is not a development, but it is something that happened. President Maduro has called for a Asamblea Nacional Constituyente, which is a constituent, it is a national assembly to reform the constitution.
He wants to rewrite it.
He wants to rewrite the constitution. But what is the problem? That is wrong, that is fraudulent, and that is not democratic. Why? Because he says that this National Assembly that will rewrite the constitution, their members are not going to be elected by the people. They are going to be elected by sectoral, it is going to work based on sectoral representatives. That is not democracy. I mean, if we are going to have elections in one country, any country, you cannot say only journalists and public servants and cameramen will be allowed to vote. You need everybody to vote, because if not, you are violating one of the main principles of democracy, which is equality. Equality, political representation. And so therefore you are vulnerating almost all the principles that constitute the basis and the basics of democracy.
Thank you for running that down and running that down so succinctly so we can understand. How does the OAS see it right now, where we are at this point in time, and how does the government of the president, Maduro, see it? How does each side see it right now? Or is that even fair to say, sides?
The OAS has a permanent council, which is the council composed by representatives of all countries that are member states of the OAS. This permanent council has worked hard on the Venezuelan crisis and on the recent events in Venezuela, and they adopted a resolution on April the 3rd declaring that Venezuela is living an unconstitutional alteration of democratic order and calling Venezuelan government to restore democracy. This was a resolution officially adopted by consensus by the Permanent Council of the OAS. After that, the Permanent Council of the OAS called for a ministerial meeting, a foreign ministers meeting to approach the recent events in Venezuela. This meeting is not scheduled yet. It may happen in the month of May.
Question. Is there a possibility that OAS could suspend Venezuela from the organization?
Well, based in this Inter-American Democratic Charter, you have several steps. One of them is under Article 20. Any country or the Secretary General, Almagro, can convene a meeting of the Permanent Council to deal with the situation in Venezuela.
So it could happen.
Under Article 21, which is the following article, of course, it is said that the organization may suspend a country if it doesn't comply with democracy and human rights.
Okay. Clearly, that's not being done right now in Venezuela. From the governance point of view, do I read someplace that they might even request to withdraw from the Organization of American States?
They have done it, but that is not an automatic process.
They have done it.
They have done it. They have done it last Friday.
Did that put the paperwork in motion, or is it automatically they're out?
It is a process. It is
Process,
a process
that's what I thought.
under the OAS charter when a country, which is an unprecedented situation, never in the history of OAS a country has requested to withdraw from the organization. And withdrawing from the organization is not the solution. The solution is restoring democracy and respecting and promoting human rights in the country and opening a humanitarian channel that allow people to receive.
But it does not appear, Mr. Koncke, that the president of the country has any desire to go in that direction, huh?
The problem here is not about desires. The problem here is about legal obligations. I mean, democracy is not an option. Democracy is the solution, and democracy is mandatory in the inter-American system. So the solution to this crisis are elections.
Indeed, we agree. Let's go off on another tangent for a second. Does the United States, would it be a good thing for the United States to get involved, or is that just fraught with trouble? I know that the Vatican has spoken out about it. China has some very deep interest there as far as repayment of obligations. Cuba has had something to say about it. So where do we stand? You know, what's going to happen? I mean, if the president wants to rewrite the Constitution and the OAS says, you know, democracy and human rights are important, what's next?
Let me finish with something I was going to answer you. Yes, they have requested to be the withdrawal from the organization. It is a process that will take 2 years. During these 2 years, they are member states with all their obligations and prerogatives under the charter. So this process will take until 2019.
There are 34 countries out there. What they must fear, they must be incredibly concerned. What's the feeling amongst all the membership? What do they think?
They are concerned. They are more than concerned because the situation is dramatic in Venezuela. The situation is dramatic. And answering to your question, yes, the role of every country in the region is key to find a solution to the Venezuelan major crisis. Why? Because one, international pressure, peer pressure, is one of the most powerful tools that exist in diplomacy and that exist as a way to restore democracy. No regime, no dictatorship has survived in our region since the signature of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, when the Inter-American Democratic Charter was applied.
But Mr. Koncke, with great respect, I say this, tell that to the United States vis-a-vis North Korea. I mean, diplomatic pressure, sanctions, and so on and so forth, that would be a wonderful thing. And I'm hoping that the peer pressure of other countries in the area, especially bordering countries, would have a profound effect on the president, so he might see the light of day. I mean, it's in the benefit of the government, and it's in the benefit of the people, of course, huh?
It's in the benefit of the people, and it's in the benefit of the region to
have
democracy.
That's a good point.
To have democracy again in Venezuela, because when you don't have democracy in a country in the region, that creates destabilization in the region. It creates it. It creates concerns. It creates migration from country to country.
What would you have us keep an eye on over the next weeks or several months? What would you have us keep our eyes on the newspaper and on television and radio? What would you have us, for signals that we can see that maybe some progress is being made?
We're going to have this meeting of foreign ministers at the OAS. That will be important. It will certainly be during the month of May. And
good.
At the same time in June, in Mexico, in Cancun, we are having the General Assembly of the OAS. That is at the ministerial level too. That will be an important moment.
Wonderful. So you've put it on the table. Foreign ministers in May, OAS, and then June, the entire OAS meeting in Mexico? Huh?
Very likely in May, certainly in June in Mexico. So
Yeah, it could happen there.
When peers, as we were saying,
are
together and they articulate their positions and they convey a message to a government that has become undemocratic and that has become a regime, that in our region has to have some effect. And the main problem is we have people suffering in Venezuela. We have people dying in Venezuela by the repression, by hunger, by lack of medicines. It is really, really dramatic. It is very different. You mentioned North Korea, and I don't want to talk about countries that are not part of our organization. But it is very different because there's no democratic charter at the United Nations, for instance. North Korea is a member of the United Nations, but you don't have a democratic charter there.
Uh-huh. So, you have for OAS.
But we have it in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas.
We know all the negative things that we could talk about: poverty and drug trafficking and corruption. I know that's near and dear to the Secretary General's heart. And those are important issues. But tell us some good things, some accomplishments, some positive things that are happening amongst the OAS countries and community, huh?
There are many positive things. There are many positive things, and there are many positive things in which the OAS General Secretariat, through the Secretary General Luis Almagro, has been working in the region since he started being Secretary General in 2015. For instance, and I will mention only some of them. The OAS has been very involved in Haiti, in the democratic process that ended by electing President Jovenel Moïse, who took office in February this year. Haiti has been going through this process. The OAS sent a diplomatic mission to Port-au-Prince last year that was very successful, and now Haiti is in the democratic path after a very long process of elections that were not flawless, to say it somehow. Now there's an elected president, and Haiti can start working in the path to development. That is very important for the region as a whole. We are also working, Secretary General has visited Managua, and we are also working with Nicaragua in the strengthening of democracy in the country. We're going to send an electoral observation mission to the municipal elections in Nicaragua in December this year. That is an important accomplishment for the Nicaraguan government and for the OAS, we understand.
Russia is insinuating itself into Nicaragua, huh?
All countries in our region may have diplomatic relations with many other countries outside the region. That's part of the dynamics of the foreign policy. But in what it regards the OAS, we are going to observe the municipal elections this year. Elections have not been observed internationally in Nicaragua since 2011, so it is an accomplishment. We are going to work with the Nicaraguan government that has been very open in this, in purging the electoral registry for these municipal elections and for the future. We are going to work with them in political representation. We are going to work with them in strengthening separation of powers, and that is a good thing. So
Haiti, Nicaragua, what else is going on?
Corruption is something that must be fought against in the region. Corruption is a problem we have in the region. It is a problem in the world, but here we're focusing in the region. And we installed this mission against corruption and impunity in Honduras in 2015. The mission is working. Yes.
We're down to the end of our time, I see on the clock. United States banging heads a bit with Canada and with Mexico, both members of OAS. Will there be a trade war?
It is something that is not happening within the OAS, but it is part, yes, of their relations and trade relations, which are very important. Hopefully diplomacy will always prevail, and I think the signals that from all the three governments will be constructive, and we continue to be constructive.
Will there be a wall? Will Mexico pay for it?
That's part also of the dynamics of the bilateral relation. In the case of the World Secretary General Almagro said something last year. He said that wars are not necessarily constructive. He said it differently. It was a strong statement. I'm sure both governments, the American government and the Mexican government, are working together in their bilateral agenda, and we are hopeful that diplomacy will have the last word, of course.
Mr. Koncke, thank you so much for your education. A terrific conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. For information about This is America and the World, and to watch all of our programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net, and look for us on Facebook and Twitter. You can now listen to all of our ambassador interviews on our new podcast, the Ambassador Series. It's available on our website and iTunes. This is America and the World is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Ambassador Julia Chang Block, President. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Petrolin Group, expertise with integrity in the fields of oil and gas, exploration and production, energy, and infrastructure. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing, and distribution services.